African Canadian population. So let me just take a moment to offer you formal definition of mental health. This is what the organization says about mental health. A state of well-being in which every individual realizes his or her own potential, can cope with the normal stresses of life, can work productively and fruitfully, and is able to contribute to their community. Right? That would be good mental health. Yeah. Now, mental illness is often referred to, according to the Canadian Mental Health Association, as health problems that affect the way one thinks about themselves, relates to others, and interacts with the world around them. It affects one's thoughts, feelings, and behavior. Mental illness can disrupt one's life and create challenges, but the CMHA says with the right support, a person can get back to a path to recovery and wellness. Right? So that we have a sense as to what it means to have good mental health and what it means to suffer from mental illness. So in the past, it was believed that mental illness was the result of a person's biological makeup combined with perhaps a negative lifestyle or negative lifestyle choices. But now we know that mental health is very complex, right? We particularly know, if we look at the social determinants of health, that mental health has as much to do with your lifestyle as it has to do with the conditions around you, the conditions within which your life is being lived. So that how we are born, how we grow, how we live, how we work, and how we age all has an impact on the person of good mental health or ill health. The nature of the neighborhoods in which we live, for instance. The types of relationships we have with people in the community. In our families, to start with, and in the community, has an impact on our. So these are three dimensions that are often referred to when we're talking about. Certainly that's the case in our context here. We would identify serious mental illness by diagnosis, and often the diagnosis includes schizophrenia, bipolar disorder, and chronic depression. Second dimension is disability. That refers to the extent to which individuals have the ability to function in one or more life activities, and the extent to which that is limited. These activities include sort of basic living skills, instrumental living skills, and functional living skills, how we function in a social context. And the third dimension is duration, and it refers to the ongoing nature of that illness. And that is not only the continuous evidence of disorder, but also to the episodes that happen from time to time, or the periodic episodes that happen from time to time that manifest mental illness. And you can have individuals in and out of these episodes. In and out of these episodes. You can have someone who is maybe 80% of the time in good mental health, but the other 20% of the time they might be experiencing ill mental health. And the unfortunate thing about mental health is that although the majority of your time might be spent with good mental health, the 20% might so compromise your health that it might harm you substantially. Right? It might harm you substantially. We know of people who have relatively good mental health, well adjusted within society, and then when they have an episode, it might lead to catastrophe. It might lead to catastrophe. We know a lot of young people who are dealing with persons with mental health. We have not focused on the young population as much when it comes to mental health, and yet we should. Especially the young people who are immigrating with their parents into this environment, who are being removed from what is familiar, who are being removed from what is comfortable, who are being removed from their relationships with their colleagues, and they're being asked to start over again in an environment that, quite frankly, is often very hostile. So, both as parents and as adults in the community, we need to look out for our young people. We need to be concerned about what's happening with them in the school environment, what's happening with them in the community environment, what's happening with them at home. Because we know there's a lot of literature about the integration of young people from the Caribbean in the 1970s and 80s, whose parents came here ahead of them, and then they were brought and reunited with their parents. And the challenge was those relationships had to be reconstituted. And they were very, very challenging, because so many of them had lived for 2, 3 on addressing that challenge. Okay. I was told we need to move along, so I won't spend too much time. But let me just quickly say that when it comes to the question of psychosis, when it comes to the question of diagnosis, we're familiar with schizophrenia, sometimes referred to as psychotic disorders. We're familiar with mood disorders, depression, and I think I said something about bipolar. Familiar with anxiety. Anxiety includes the post-traumatic stress disorder. A lot of our young people are dealing with anxiety. A lot of our young people are dealing with anxiety. A lot of it is not diagnosed, right? And so they might have challenges in the school system, and they are predominantly white female teachers who misread it as lack of respect. Okay? They will misread it as lack of respect. And they will not, right? So, mood disorder. Sad, despairing mood that lasts beyond a few days or a few weeks impairs individuals' capacity to participate in society or to engage their everyday responsibilities, whether it's work or in the home. And the truth of the matter is, very often when you are an immigrant or an immigrant family, you think you don't have time for depression. The burden on you, or the burdens on you, are such that you cannot afford to take time out to reflect and to heal. And yet, the longer you go without addressing it, the more likely it is that your condition will deteriorate. Right? So an individual that has major depression issues has difficulty addressing mood disorder. Right? And so it is likely that that experience or that condition will fester and perhaps even grow much worse. Sometimes it is manifested through how they cope. Changes in appetite and weight, right? Sleeping problems, throwing themselves into work or certain hobbies, okay? A sense of helplessness, a loss of energy, Okay? Sometimes it matures into thoughts of suicide. Right? We want to deal with it before we get there, but there is a kind of continuum that, if we don't address, can lead us there. Okay? The truth of the matter is that our health improves as we go up the income ladder as well. The same applies to mental health. And that is because of the impact of our jobs, the impact of our education, the impact of our neighborhoods, the impact of our relationships, the impact of our community on our health. Right? So the question of community health, the question of the kind of housing that we have access to is important. The question of the kind of employment we have is important. The question of the level of income we have are all important in terms of dealing with mental health. Some people have referred to the social determinants of health as including things like food, education, transportation, employment, safe physical environment, housing, social inclusion, migration, and health and social services. All of this have an impact on our health. And from a health equity point of view, we are looking at the extent to which some and all of these questions are addressed in our dealing with the question of mental health. Let me just end by saying a couple of things. One is that we have done a lot of work over the years to establish the reality that race and racism are determinants of health. The determinants of health. I'll give you an example. When COVID happened, when the pandemic happened, the first sense that people had, public policy folks, was that it was going to impact the older folks, predominantly, the people who are 60, 70, 80 years old, predominantly. And the first manifestations actually suggested that. The first set of data that came out showed that the people who were being most adversely impacted were people who were much older. Right? They were the most vulnerable ones, and they were actually in that category is where we found most of the fatal cases. And then, as we continue to do research, as Toronto Public Health continued to do research, and especially as they did research that disaggregated the categories of people so that we could tell what was happening to this particular category of people versus another category of people, we found in this city, in Toronto, we found that Black people were the most affected. We found that Black people were the most affected. It was amazing. First of all, we heard about the United States, and we thought, the situation in the United States is different from it is in Toronto, so maybe it's understandable that Black people are much more affected in the United States than other populations. Then we started to look at the data, and we found it was Black people who were most affected. It was amazing. Let me give you a statistic. Black people who constitute about 10% of the population in Toronto accounted for 21% of the cases. 21% of the cases. Okay? White people who constitute 49% of the population in Toronto accounted for 17% of the cases. You see that disproportionality? 17% of the cases. And the other people accounted for high numbers. South Asians accounted for 20%, they are 14% of the population. Right? Middle Easterners accounted for like 10%, they're 4% of the population, accounted for 10%. And the way to understand that is to understand that before we got into COVID, we had a situation where those determinants of health I was talking about were really poor for black people. And the reason why they're really poor for black people is because of our identity. It's because of race. So now we have public health officials understanding that they need to intervene in the communities, the neighborhoods where black people and other racialized people live, more so than focus on seniors. But we would not have known that had we not done the work. And I can tell you that it's been a long time coming, and Kai probably knows something about this, to get the system here to acknowledge that race and racism are determinants of health, and they have an impact on health. Once we got there, and they agreed that they would disaggregate and look at what was happening with this population, they realized that they could be more effective in intervention, in delivering public health, once they had that analysis. Once they had that analysis. Right? The last thing I want to say about this is that, in as much as because of our immigration status, because of our race, because of the nature of our families, we have all these challenges, and as much as that is the case, there's something else that is important to acknowledge, and that is that we are here today because we are an incredibly resilient people. We are an incredibly resilient people. Okay? I know that there are populations around the world that talk about the challenges they have faced through their history. And some of them even use that to murder other people on the basis of the claim that they have had this incredible challenge through their history. But look at black people. Look at the experience over the centuries that we have had. We're an incredibly resilient people who would not be here today had it not been for the fact that we're an incredibly resilient people. So we have that counting for us. But it means that we cannot afford to be complacent. It means that we need to turn that resilience into action. And I am thrilled to see the work that the foundation is doing and other people in the community are doing. Kai is here to speak, Reverend is here to speak, because they are expressing that resilience through their community work and the community action. And I pray is right, we pray a lot. And I pray that all of us will push in the same direction, and that today will be one of the days that we put as a building block in that responsibility and the work that has to be done. So I want to thank you for being here, and I wish you a wonderful conference, and I especially wish you a good day going forward. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Professor. Another applause for Professor Grace. Thank you so very much for those insights. And yes, at least I've learned something today. Thank you so much once again. We're taking a short commercial break with some sweet music. Before we get to our next speaker, who is Reverend Pastor Jumba Eddie. Thank you so much, ladies and gentlemen, for those of you who just joined us. This is the African Canadian Foundation, which has organized this second global conference in substance abuse, addiction, mental resilience. I hope we are learning. Thank you so much once again for making time for us.